The Saints and the Giants could be eyeing the same quarterback early in the draft, while Tyreek Hill might be sent to a new team next Thursday night. We discuss the latest NFL news and draft rumors on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst at NFL Network. Vinny's not here with us today, but I am joined by Kate Magdziuk, co-host of the Locked On Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, and of course, my wife. Always great to have you on today, Kate. Thank you for joining us. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You can join today at FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app. All right, today we have quite a bit of rumors going around about the draft and a piece of NFL news here with Derek Carr. So we get the alert last week that Derek Carr is injured. He has a shoulder injury. He can miss the entire 2025 season, right? That's the worry. However, since that news has come out, there's some speculation from people around the football industry. Mike Florio kind of started it all by saying it kind of seems like maybe Carr recognized that the relationship with the Saints isn't going in the direction he wants, and that maybe the Saints are eyeing a quarterback in the first round of the draft, and he doesn't want to be in the situation where he's competing against a rookie or he's not getting the starting job. So maybe he's just playing, a game here and playing some hardball. That's all coming from Mike Florio's theory, which, I mean, as soon as the news came out, that's what popped in my head.
It absolutely did. And I don't think we're alone in that. And I think, generally speaking, the conjecture here, athletic reporter Diana Rossini also backed this up, that it just seemed kind of quote unquote fishy. So Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck was touring the Saints practice facility on an official 30 visit ahead of the 2025 NFL draft. And if you're paying attention to Shuck's draft stock right now, it is skyrocketing. He's probably going to end up a second round pick. But there's no doubt that the Saints are definitely in position with the 9th overall pick to potentially grab the QB2 off the board, which most people would say is Shedeur Sanders coming out of Colorado. But it's very interesting that this is the buzz coming out here, because first of all, I guess I'm kind of confused because Derek Carr, if this word of an injury is coming out from his camp, does that really give you any leverage to be potentially traded? He has a no trade clause. So I think that move alone would kind of force the Saints' hand if he's not going to be available, quote unquote. Is he looking for a release? I don't really know what he's looking for, because I just don't know yet where this is headed for the Saints. But I think everybody could probably look at the writing on the wall and assume that Derek Carr is not the Saints' long-term option.
Yeah, it would seem weird to me that they'd come out with a serious injury, right? That could keep him out the entire 25 season. Like maybe a small injury or something where he's like, I should be able to make it back, or maybe I miss a couple games. But that does seem like it would be much harder to then get a trade if that's what he wants. You would think he would just come out and request a trade instead of bringing up this injury. I don't know. It does seem sketchy and fishy. And we do know it makes sense that the Saints want to upgrade, right? But the question is Shedeur Sanders an upgrade, especially when it comes to fantasy? That's what we're worried about here, right? So when it comes to Chris Olave, when it comes to Rashid Shaheed when he's healthy, when it comes to Alvin Kamara, who would they be better with? Is it Shedeur Sanders or is it Chris Olave? Because, I mean, it seems like Kellen Moore has big plans for Chris Olave this year, and he says he's going to be a huge impact in this offense. So as long as Olave can stay healthy, because he's been dealing with those concussions, too many concussions in his short career, but he should get a ton of targets. But are they better coming from Carr than Shedeur Sanders? I don't know. He and Carr have had up and down connection. Last year, they barely got to play together. It was only a handful of games, not even really. And in 3 of those games, Olave did have over 80 receiving yards. It's just we haven't got to see that ceiling with Derek Carr.
And I think a big part of that is just the fact that Derek Carr historically does not throw a ton of touchdowns. And I mean, we can talk like chicken or the egg. Is it personnel? He's played with some really talented wide receivers in his time. But again, the touchdown production on like a per pass attempt basis just has not been there for Derek Carr historically. So I do kind of wonder because when we're looking at like player for player, the kind of archetype of quarterback between Carr and Shador Sanders is actually pretty similar. What do both of them do like pretty well? They're pure pocket passers. They're not going to win with their legs. Um, Derek Carr had the second lowest uncatchable inaccurate pass rate among quarterbacks with 500 or more pass attempts over the past 3 seasons per PFF. Meanwhile, Sanders is 14% uncatchable inaccurate throw rate, ranked third lowest among quarterbacks with 500 plus pass attempts in the NCAA this past season or these past 2 seasons. They're both accurate. They're both, I would say, quarterbacks that I trust to get the football to their wide receivers. So I think the biggest question for me is, do we think Sanders has more upside in terms of his touchdown upside? And that I don't know yet, but
That can't be hard. I mean,
it can't be
Derek Carr
hard.
is not a touchdown thrower in his career.
But let me say, the question then becomes for me is what if it's not Shador Sanders that the Saints are eyeing at the 9th overall pick? So there was a really interesting report that came out from NFL draft expert Todd McShay this week of The Ringer. He actually predicts that maybe it's not Shador Sanders, who's the consensus QB2 on pretty much all draft boards right now. He's eyeing Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart as the second quarterback off the board by the Saints at the number 9 overall pick. And Jackson Dart, like there are a lot of questions about Jackson Dart, how his skills will translate. But what I thought was really interesting was that Todd McShay talked a lot about like the type of quarterback that Kellen Moore has like historically worked with. He's worked with Dak Prescott, who is historically, maybe not now, but in his heyday, a mobile, more athletic passer. You look at Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, who, despite the fact that he's like a giant quarterback and is still that pure pocket passer, like he's still mobile enough and he's got a strong arm. And he pegs Jackson Dart as that guy in this draft, not Shador Sanders. So that's something that I think is really interesting and worth kind of just keeping an eye on because I don't know, maybe there's another team that could be in on Shador Sanders instead.
And there is one, and it is right. I mean, well before the Saints pick, and we'll get into that in a second. But one last question to close up this conversation. Let's say they go with a quarterback. Derek Carr ends up getting traded. His injury's fine. Like it's just all made up. Is there a good landing spot for him? Like maybe the Steelers if they don't draft Rodgers, maybe the Jets if they don't draft Shador Sanders, or Cleveland if they don't get a quarterback. Like I don't really see a good spot for him in terms of him helping any fantasy assets across the league.
I don't see a good landing spot. And when I'm kind of looking at the board and I'm thinking team needs, etc., like I'm going to be honest, a lot of the teams that came to mind are kind of backup spots. Like I think, man, if you sent him to Miami to back up to a Tonga Vailoa, I think that would be a really fantastic and interesting fit. But every place that I'm looking and I'm saying, oh, he'd be a good option in this particular offense, he's the backup there. So what do you do with Derek Carr? I don't know. He's had these injury issues, and now the market for quarterbacks, maybe outside of, the Steelers at this point, is kind of dry. And I don't even know that he'd be a great fit in Arthur Smith's system. So like, where does that leave us? I don't know.
I don't know either, but we're going to get into more Shador Sanders conversation right after a quick break because he went and visited the Giants, even though they've added 2 veteran quarterbacks this offseason. I'm with them. I think they should still be eyeing a quarterback. We will discuss right after a quick break. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. And now I budget smarter and save more. It's also super easy to manage money with your partner to use Monarch Money. It's smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. So not only do we have the Saints connected Shedeur Sanders now, or maybe Jackson Dart, but we also have Shedeur Sanders visiting the Giants this week. So they added Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston to their quarterback room this offseason. And I get it. They needed to add a veteran. You can't just, I mean, they had literally nobody besides Tommy DeVito that they added to. But I don't think Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston should keep them from drafting a quarterback. I am confused why they added both. That doesn't make sense to me if they're going to go with a rookie, but whatever.
What's interesting is that this kind of buzz around Shedeur Sanders feels kind of recent, right?
Yeah, it does. I feel like once I think the Giants know he's going to be available to them, right? Because they know Cam Ward almost very, very likely is going to the Titans. And they must assume that the Browns aren't going to take a quarterback. So they have to do their due diligence. And we'll see if they like him enough to actually take him at number 3 overall. Maybe they're just creating this buzz to, get teams to trade up. However, I don't know if you'd waste a top 30 visit on just trying to create buzz, but maybe if you can get draft picks out of it. For Malik Nabers, because that's who we're most worried about when it comes to the Giants. It's not like we want to draft Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or Shedeur Sanders, even if he gets traded or he gets drafted by the Giants. But with Malik Nabers, I actually would love this because I have Malik Nabers ranked very high for this upcoming year. But once they sign Russell Wilson, I had to knock him down because Russell Wilson, he spreads the ball around, but he plays it very, very safe too. He takes a lot of sacks and he refuses to throw over the middle. Like, those things just aren't good for Malik Nabers. They were not good for George Pickens last year. And Russ just hasn't been a good quarterback in quite a long time. Now, Jameis Winston, we know if he was the quarterback, like it would be amazing for Malik Nabers, but it's not going to last long because Winston will throw 20 interceptions in the 5 games that he gets to play and be benched. But with Sanders, like, no, he's not a super mobile guy. And he's not super exciting, but he is a very, like you brought up earlier, he's a very, very accurate quarterback. And he knows he'll throw over the middle. He knows how to lead his receivers on those, on those routes over the middle. And that's great for a guy like Malik Nabers, who is so good after the catch. And he has a lot more scramble. Like, he's not a super mobile guy where he's going to get 400 rushing yards, but he is a lot more mobile than Russell Wilson or Winston at this point. And
he's mobile enough to help extend plays. And honestly, I think that's also, like, we talk about Russell Wilson taking too many sacks. Shedeur Sanders does the same, but I also think some of that is, he's mobile enough to extend the play, sometimes beyond what he maybe should.
Yes. Sometimes he holds on the ball too long, but I still think, no, this is the issue with them taking Shedeur Sanders. Does he get to start right away? Probably not. Like, they signed Russell Wilson. He's going to be the week 1 starter until he's bad enough to get benched. So it'll take time there. Will he even get the second chance? Or will they say Jameis Winston has to get his chance before he throws all the interceptions? Like, will it take 2 quarterbacks to get benched before he goes? But I will say, for Malik Nabers' future, I would like them to take a rookie quarterback. And I do think Sanders would be a good one for him because you wouldn't get those passing attempts taken away with a bunch of rushes from the quarterback. You're going to get accurate passes. And I do think, especially if he got a chance as a rookie, the Sanders is much more likely to lean on one guy. His best guy is a rookie than Russell Wilson would be now that he's such a veteran in his career and more willing to spread the ball around. So if they take Shedeur Sanders, I will be more excited for Malik Nabers as long as Sanders gets his shot. Moving on to another subject here outside of Sanders, Travis Hunter is being heavily linked to the Browns all of a sudden at number 2 overall. Now, I do actually, the Browns situation is not the best, right? It's the Cleveland Browns, and that's where fantasy assets go to die. But also, they don't really have a quarterback. It's Kenny Pickett at the moment, and Joe Flacco. They did re-sign him, but Joe Flacco's not the worst for fantasy players, at least his time with the Browns. But what I find very interesting is that the Browns are one of the teams that view him primarily as a wide receiver over cornerback. Now, Hunter did come out to say that he would stop playing football before he played just one position, which I think that's also good for fantasy. But Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, he didn't say he couldn't play corner. He just said in terms of Travis Hunter, corner or receiver, the answer is yes, he can play both. I think that's what makes him special. I think receiver primarily first, but I think what makes him a bit of a unicorn is the fact he can do it at a high level. He can do both at a high level. But that's, I think, really interesting for Travis Hunter because, all of these rankings and talk before the draft, Travis Hunter is primarily categorized in the cornerback situation, right? Category. And not brought up as much as a wide receiver. But we know he can be a very good wide receiver. At least he was at Colorado. He has the skill set where he could get a lot of targets and be good in the NFL.
If he was just coming out as a wide receiver, he would be the wide receiver one in this draft class pretty easily.
Exactly. So if he lands with a team that wants to primarily use him as a wide receiver, with him using cornerback sparingly or, half the time or whatever they decide to use, I think that's huge for fantasy, getting another good wide receiver. But does the quarterback situation kind of ruin it? They have targets available. It's Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku and no one else. Elijah Moore's gone. That's 102 targets gone from last year.
Hey, Cedric Tillman had his breakout last year. Come on.
True. Amari Cooper gone halfway through the year, but 53 targets last year. Jordan Akins, 58 targets, fourth on the team. That should not be happening. So there's potential here with Travis Hunter, and he is a special talent. But if he has to play with Kenny Pickett, how excited are we? But maybe it's just for the year.
And that's, I think, the biggest question about, his fit with the Browns is not for me necessarily like the wide receiver versus cornerback thing. Cause I do think that I think like if you maximize his potential at either position, I think it's wide receiver that wins out. And I do think that, yes, even if he says he's playing both at the next level, he's probably going to play one more often than other. Like let's be real. He can't be in two different positional meetings at the same time. Like there's just not, you can't split them in half. Right. And when you get into these NFL game plans, things can be a little bit like more in depth, right? Than you're going to see at the collegiate position. And I don't necessarily I think no matter what, we're probably going to see him play one position primarily over the other. The Browns are an intriguing landing spot because of that target potential. But again, the question is not necessarily even for me in 2024 or 2025, because if it's Joe Flacco, we know Joe Flacco is not going to run. He's going to deliver the football. The question really is more so what's his long-term value? And do they ever figure out the quarterback position? I don't know.
It doesn't seem like it. Since I was born, they figured it out one time and ruined it instantly. So, And I'm talking Baker Mayfield there. Yeah, it doesn't feel great for any of these fantasy, assets that we're depending on to go to Cleveland. But I really would like him to land in a spot where they primarily look at him as a wide receiver, and then also, the opportunity for targets. So we've seen guys go to bad situations before, and they end up making it better, right? And they end up being great fantasy assets. So I think we would have to consider that with Travis Hunter there if that ends up happening. We also have some rumors here that Tyreek Hill could be traded on first night of the draft. We're going to discuss that to finish today's show right after we take a quick break. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. They really just have so many options, and their app is super user-friendly. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. And a couple of bets I'm eyeing here in that first round of the NBA playoffs. I see Minnesota Timberwolves at plus 164 over the Lakers. I like that one. I like the Denver Nuggets at plus 100 against the Clippers. So lots of great options over in the app to really enjoy and get into the NBA playoffs. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, let's discuss Tyreek Hill. This is a tricky one, right? Because already after the season, there was weirdness between he and Miami. He says basically like, yeah, it was a good time, but I'm ready to go. And then they have a talk and apparently they're fine. But the trade rumors have still been kind of swirling around. And then last week, or recently, he was involved in another domestic incident with the police involved. It was dismissed yet again, but we don't know when the NFL is ever going to get involved or not involved. It's not very consistent, right? So we don't know what's going on there. We don't know if that's going to keep teams away or not. But it does feel like as we get closer and closer to the draft, that Tyreek Hill is not going to be a Miami Dolphin much longer. Are you with me on that?
Oh yeah, the buzz seems kind of real. You even had Tyreek Hill weigh in on like social media. He made a video acknowledging the trade rumors. And we kind of heard that there could be this buzz of like a Miami Dolphin star on the way. The team did acknowledge that they are, willing to move on from Jalen Ramsey. So like, is Tyreek Hill next? Maybe. And I don't know. It's kind of intriguing. I don't even know if the storyline for me is Tyreek Hill, but we can get to Jalen Waddle in a minute here. If he lands in a good spot, like first of all, what's a good spot for Tyreek Hill? For a trade that seems like a realistic opportunity for you.
I know what stinks is that two of the better landing spots, obviously the Bills with Josh Allen and then the Patriots with all the targets, they're in division. So it's very unlikely the Dolphins are going to trade him there unless they think he is going to get in trouble, and then maybe you do it with the NFL. But so you have to dig a little bit deeper. And I was thinking Green Bay could be very interesting.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Now, I can't really picture Tyreek Hill living in Green Bay. Like, I don't think that would really be his vibe.
Could you have pictured him living in Kansas City? No, but he did it. Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, true. But with Green Bay, I mean, they're in a desperate need for a true wide receiver one. I mean, you can only make it so far with a bunch of, unless you have a Patrick Mahomes, right? Or a Josh Allen. You can only make it so far with a bunch of wide receiver 2s and 3s. They do not have a true wide receiver one. Jordan Love has a good enough arm. Like Jordan Love can sling it. He's inconsistent with turnovers and his brain, but he can sling it enough to get Tyreek Hill those deep passes. And I do think he would thrive with Tyreek Hill. So I think that would be an interesting landing spot. And then you got to go with the Chargers, right? Because the Bills would be so interesting because of Josh Allen. The Chargers would be so interesting because of Justin Herbert. And they're not in the division. No, they're in the conference, but not in the division. So that's good. And then also, like, Ladd McConkey is a great possession wide receiver, but Tyreek Hill can be that, that difference maker for this team. I think they would pair really well together. So Chargers or Green Bay would be my top two options.
I really like that fit. I really like Green Bay in particular because I do think that element of speed that Tyreek Hill could bring to that offense could be something significant. And again, we've seen him play in the cold, harsh weather too. So like he's not necessarily like one of those Miami guys that you're like, I don't know if you can actually play in cold weather. Like Tyreek Hill has that. But I guess the question for me, it comes back to also like Tyreek Hill, what does he have left in the tank? Posted a career low PFF receiving grade 77.3 in 2024, second lowest yards per reception average in 2024, 11.8 yards per reception, only 6 touchdowns, again, tied for a career low. Career low yards per route run, 1.75 in comparison to his career average of 2.46. 3.5 yards after the catch per reception, also a career low in comparison to his career average of 4.9. Like, this was by far and away the worst season of Tyreek Hill's career. How much of that was maybe the wrist injury that he was dealing with versus the fact that he's an aging wide receiver? He's 31 years old. And I don't know, do you lose a step in terms of your speed when you get older? Maybe. Tyreek Hill's like 90% is still probably like most people's 150%. But like, it's hard to evaluate, I think, the aging player versus the injury at this point for me.
It is. And I really don't think he just fell apart from being a back-to-back 1,700-yard receiver in 2022 and 2023 to just completely falling apart in 1 year. I do think the wrist injury really hindered him throughout the year. And also, apparently he was dealing with an ankle injury. I don't know. We didn't get full information on that. But I do think it was the injuries plus the Dolphins offense was just kind of a mess. Like, they're using
Yeah.
Jonnu Smith like crazy. They couldn't get Jalen Waddle the ball to save their lives. Like, it just wasn't a good offense at all last year. And we still saw some boom games from Tyreek Hill. It's not like he just completely fell flat on his face. He still had a few really big games, some, okay games in there too. It was just so many terrible games that we just don't normally see from Tyreek Hill thrown in there. He did just turn 31 years old in March. I still think he has a year or two left. Not where he's going to be the wide receiver one with 1,800 yards and 13 touchdowns like in 2023, but I still think he has plenty in him to be a top 10 wide receiver if he lands in a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the upside's still there. I do think you're right. The injuries probably are the biggest factor there because, the question mark is not, is Tyreek Hill's 90% better than most? Yeah, it definitely is. And I also think just in general, maybe the age factor also kind of ties into the health factor. You don't bounce back as quickly. I know I don't whenever I succumb to injury. So I kind of I can feel that, but I think, any of the offenses that you mentioned here, the Chargers, the Green Bay Packers, he steps in and he's a top 10 wide receiver. So for me, those landing spots feel like good fits for his potential fantasy value, and perhaps more intriguingly, the value of the quarterbacks that are going to be throwing to them and in terms of their total upside.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you, Kate, for joining us today. Please go listen to hers and Marcus Mosher's podcast at Locked On Dynasty Fantasy Football. They are hitting on all of the prospects, getting into so much detail. So if you want to learn more about the draft and the prospects, go give them a listen. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. But for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We will be back tomorrow talking about more fantasy goodness. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.